the only sale word in this slide is the word modern. I think rest is reality. Uh, so Arjuna, modern test automation framework. The word modern I have introduced as a sales thing, trying to make it look fancy, but I mean it as well. The test engines or test automation frameworks, they have taken a growth journey in the past years, and the needs have changed. The applications have become complex. The needs of companies, organizations, teams have changed as well. So hence the word modern, that I'm trying to create something which caters to today's test automation needs, which the teams have. Currently, I head the test automation for Trendig. It's a company in Germany, famous for its Agile Testing Days conference, which happens every year in the US and Potsdam in Germany. And I'm the founder of TestMile. You are looking at TestMile right now. So under the banner of TestMile, I provide consulting and training services in India and abroad. So with that short introduction, let me give a brief about Arjuna and what this presentation is going to be about. So this is the open source world. People want frameworks, tools, everything to be open source. The only thing is that they never look at its source. They just want it to be open sourced. So for example, there would be lakhs, maybe engineers in India using Selenium. And the case built for it in India is, and everywhere is, it's open sourced. But just look at people, look at its source or do anything about its source. That number would be maybe 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So it would be in tens. So my humble request is that when there is an open source framework or any tool which is open source, look at its source. That's the whole purpose of making it open source. So that's the difference between a framework being free versus free and open source. So Arjuna is free, no strings attached. It's open sourced and open sourced under Apache license. Many people don't understand the difference of licensing. So there are two types of open source licenses. One is where if I have open sourced and if you use it, then you have to open source your code as well. Yeah, so these are strict open source licenses. Apache license is not that. So when you mark something as Apache licensed, what it means is you are free to do anything. You are free to use Arjuna in your work. That work may be open sourced, that work may be closed source. So there is no implication on you at all. The other thing is you might make money out of it. So if you use Arjuna in your work, you can use your work commercially and make any money, right? So that is the difference of Apache license and some other this style of licenses versus the other category of open source licenses. So in short, do anything. Yeah, Arjuna is yours. You can pick it up and do anything with it. Freely use it in your personal work or commercial work. You can find more details. So this slide deck would, there is some noise. So can you mute at your side, please? Yeah, thank you so much. So these links would be anyways shared with you. So the source code of Arjuna is available on GitHub. And one of the goals which I had, and which is a deterrent when it comes to open source adoption, is documentation. I have made documentation, comprehensive documentation, as my key goal when Arjuna is out. So when you look at the documentation, I'm sure you would get that feel as well. Most of the open source projects are not documented. The developers focus too much on the coding, but not the documentation. So very little is available. I understand and appreciate that Arjuna is a new framework. There would be very less tutorials or no tutorials available out there. So I decided that I would write the documents myself. And so that if you want to adopt Arjuna, there is a reference point. You can go there. When you go there, you would realize it's almost a book which is written for Arjuna. And it is going to expand with more and more examples added. There's a lot of example code which is created for Arjuna as well for your reference. The current, so one of the other things which I have realized is that people ask that, is it a web automation framework? Is it a mobile automation framework? Is it a web service automation framework? Is it a network automation framework? I think that's because of a bit lack of education on automation amongst testers. A framework is not a web test automation framework or a network automation framework. A framework is a framework if built in a good way. The only thing is that if you introduce an interaction library, then it starts supporting that particular type of automation. That's the only difference. So if you are, for example, in embedded world, you would not find any framework out there which directly supports you. But the thing is, you can pick any existing framework, write an interaction library for that protocol, and now your framework becomes embedded test automation framework. Yeah. So I'm making that clear because I know these questions are going to come my way. Does it support this? Does it support that? The thing is that minus the interaction library, Arjuna supports everything. Yeah. Because reporting features, test writing features, test fixtures, building resources, command line, everything in a framework is and can be built in a generic way with focus. And that's how Arjuna is created. So in case you have a requirement which is not web related, you can still very well pick up Arjuna and try out things. Yeah, and I could help you in that as well. The current focus is web test automation. In the production release, which happened some days back, it was web UI automation. That is, the interaction library was focused on web UI automation. After that, I've been working on HTTP layer automation, primarily for web services, OAuth authentication, etc. By Wednesday next week, 1.0.1 or 1.1 should be out with that support as well. Again, web focus. So that's about Arjuna, and I wanted to keep it short and not sort of a marketing thing. I'm not talking of features here, really. This presentation is split into two primary parts, or three primary parts. We would discuss the case, which I'm discussing in this webinar. I would discuss the solution and possibilities. And the third part is I would give you the list of other things which Arjuna could do for you. As I mentioned at the beginning, so Prantik, I need a help from you.
Yes.
So as of now, I am in full screen mode, and I can see some videos on the right. That's the Zoom interface. I may not be able to keep up with any comments which are coming. Yeah. So in case, there are any questions coming in, or any comment about anything which I missed, or anything anyone wants to understand further, can you help me with that, please?
Yeah, sure.
Sort of filter the questions and jump in when you can.
Yeah. Or do you want me to take it at the end of the session? I'll just keep a note of all the questions and we can take it up at the end of the session. Will that work?
See, it looks like I'm talking to myself, and
okay.
I don't want it to happen that way. Yeah. So what I'll do is maybe I'll talk on a certain slide, and then I can check with you. Okay. Or in case when I change the slide and I haven't checked with you, please jump in if there is something. Yeah. Because at the end, I don't know, by that time the context might have been lost, and I don't want that to happen. My goal is not to finish this presentation. My goal is to make it useful to whosoever is here and spared time for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Can we do this? Yeah. Thank you so much. All right. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I don't want it to be an Arjuna presentation, although I would be giving examples in Arjuna. So to help in that, what I've done is that on each slide, when I discuss a point from Arjuna's perspective, I would also discuss it from non-Arjuna perspective as a general framework discussion or an automation tip for you. I can fully appreciate that you may not use Arjuna. It is perfectly fine. Yeah. Arjuna would always have one user at least. That's me. And I'm okay with that as well. So you use Arjuna when you think it helps you. As you've spared time, you've come to this webinar to listen to me. I would try to make it useful for you, that once this webinar is over, in case you take Arjuna path, anyways, all of this information would be helpful for you. In case you are on a non-Arjuna path, there are some things which you can still carry from this presentation and use in your work. Yeah. Whenever I discuss such thing, you would find a small black box, the way you see on screen. framework tip or automation tip, etc. And the sentences or remarks which are made inside that box, they are Arjuna neutral comments, and I would spend time on that as well for you. Yeah. So I hope I can get into full gear now, Prantik.
Yes.
So far I have sort of been dragging so that more people can join in if they can, if they want to. Yeah. Sorry. All right then. So today's case, there cannot be a single presentation on any elaborate framework. So as I mentioned, this is not an Arjuna presentation because what I'm discussing here is possibly 5% of what Arjuna is about. So I thought that I would pick up a use case and focus the webinar on that so that we are able to discuss enough technical stuff on that particular case rather than features of Arjuna, which would not be, this is not a marketing presentation. So today's case is the case of web UI automation with Selenium. Selenium has grown in popularity over the last decade. Almost every test automation engineer at least knows the name. More than that, he or she must have experimented with it. The way the experiments begin is that people hear the word Selenium out of their own curiosity or maybe from career angle or pressure from company. They go to Google Mata. They end up in pages like Guru 99 or such pages. They copy paste code from there, or maybe refer poorly written books or mostly poorly created YouTube videos, and they end up in a lot of bad code. And then they blame Selenium for it. This is the typical journey of test automation with Selenium, which I find. And we would look at similar thing. This is not an anti-Selenium presentation. So I would discuss with you why Selenium is not to be blamed. Selenium is a great library, but then we cannot use it in production work. So these two statements might look like contradicting statements. These are not. So I would focus on that from framework angle and from Arjuna angle as well. Yeah. So today's case, the case of web UI automation with Selenium. Let's get started. Why do we need a framework? Shouldn't we directly use Selenium WebDriver? Everybody says it is great. These are unrelated questions actually. But people are still sort of confused with the answers. So I thought I would take this, I would build a strong case so that you understand. Yeah, because this is not discussed usually. People are shy in talking anything about Selenium. So the thing is that I may not be anti-Selenium, but I can still discuss the problems of using Selenium directly in your work. That's what I'm doing right here. About a month back, or a few weeks back, I had this webinar on Arjuna, and one of the Selenium core contributors was the host as well. So there were very interesting points which came forward in that as well. So consider this raw code in Python. If I haven't made it clear so far, Arjuna is a Python framework. So if in case you have any questions or comments, what about Java or what about C#? Can I use it with Java code? The short answer is no. Arjuna is a Python framework. And I'm not going to compare it with TestNG, for example, or other test engines. Of course, if you reach out to me, I can help you understand what are the key differences. Yeah. So this is core Selenium code. In case the first shot, when you go to Google, for example, you pick up basics of Selenium. Most of the tutorials give you such nature of code. This code represents a basic form filling. Okay, I didn't want to pick up a complex case to say what I have to say, because I believe that most of the engineers come across simple problems on a day-to-day basis, and occasionally they come across ticklish problems. When you have to make choices about frameworks, when you have to make framework decisions, the first thing which we have to cover is the base, the most fundamental requirements. So I would pick up a very, very simple example before moving forward. Yeah. So the code which you see on the screen represents a form filling. It has a login field, it has a password field, and clicking of a submit button. Typical representation of any web-based login which you which you come across. Let's look at what Selenium code looks like, or what is the first shot of Selenium which you would take. So you import typically the libraries. You would typically need WebDriver as a component. You would need a service from Selenium 4 onwards. You need a service to start the browser, in this case, Chrome. You might want to separate your username or email, password, etc. into variables. And then you, of course, you create a service object, you start the service, and then you use webdriver.remote, you associate it with the service URL. This is the concept of the hub in Selenium. Then you start with the API. So driver.get http www, let's say app.com. And then you want to do element interactions. The stages in Selenium is you first find the element, and then you, if it is a text box, you send some text to it. This particular API is called send keys. Driver.find element by ID, by XPath, by CSS selector, different types of methods are available depending on the bindings which you're using. And then I have taken an XPath example also because I'm going to talk about it later. Then you do an element.click. And then once you're done with it, let's say this was a use case. This is, let's say, representative of simulating a flow of login. You quit the driver. This looks still simple. That these are baby steps. Life is good. But there are problems in this code. Those who use Selenium might have already identified, but let me list it for you. That what are the problems here? First of all, when you say driver.find element by ID, this is not a wait logic. It would immediately look for it. And the speed at which computer or code looks for things is not the human speed. You might think that, oh, it appeared in 1 second. It's okay, but computer would look at it in a fraction of a second, in a microsecond, if you will, or in a millisecond. So what is quick for you is 1,000 times slower for a computer, or maybe more than that. So when the page appears and this element is not available, code is going to fail. The other thing which you would see is XPaths. This is still a good XPath I used. I see many comparison articles on LinkedIn spread everywhere. They make sure that they write extremely bad Selenium code to sell their tool in comparison. Yeah. So they write very bad XPaths, full XPaths, absolute XPaths. They make Selenium code look dirty, and then they show their framework. I don't want to do that. The code which you see is a decent Selenium code. And we would look at next screen that I would make it even more decent. I want to compare Arjuna with decent Selenium code, yeah, and take all the steps for that. So anyways, still there are problems. If you're an end user, when is the last time you talked like this? I want to get google.com. I want to get Facebook. You don't talk like this. You say, I want to go to, yeah, I want to open. You don't say driver. You don't say, I want to get. Selenium is a library which automates things from end user perspective. But its API calls are at times not named like that from end user perspective. Get is a very bad name for going to a URL. The other thing, for example, is element.send keys. When is the last time you said that please send keys to username field? Please send keys. You say I enter. Enter. This is the wording of your test flow. Enter username in username field. Yeah. You don't say send keys. So some of the language which has sort of crept into the Selenium library is not representative of the layer at which it automates. Get is a very good word for HTTP layer automation, but not for browser automation. So these are some other subtle problems which a framework might solve. And when you look at this nature of code, you can project it that this was only filling of 2 fields and clicking a button, and my code already looks big. Whenever you're automating, whenever you're building a product, any wrapper which you write, when you look at this code, this is a code smell. It's an indicator that you need something. something which test automators have grown to call a framework. The word means different to different people, but that's what we call it. So this is an indicator which indicates to you, yes, we need a framework. So Prantik, any comments, questions at this point?
No, Rahul, we're good.
All right. So this is the case which I am building for Selenium, but as I mentioned, not a good case. This is bad Selenium code. So my trick to prove the framework point to you is we would write better Selenium code and make the case worse for Selenium. Yeah. How good Selenium code is actually a bad case for Selenium. Let's look at next slide. The previous code which you saw is amateur code. That's not how you write production code. If you really want to write production code in Selenium, and let's say you don't have a library, you don't have wrappers created right now, then this is how it would actually look like. You have WebDriver, you import the service as earlier. Apart from that, you would want to introduce waiting logic, dynamic waiting logic or polling mechanism till the things are ready. And then you would create something like conditions. Yeah. So username, password as earlier. So you see that you create WebDriver wait when you look at Selenium's documentation. So we look at configuration passwords, which are put in variables. And we would look at web. Hello. Prantik, am I audible? Because I got a muting message.
Yeah, Rahul. So I've muted everyone else and just but you.
All right. Interesting guy. So we get these variables. We put all the configuration related things here. We create something called WebDriver wait. This is called explicit wait in the Selenium world, which is basically polling for something. So if you are trying to find an element and it is not available right away, you would want it to be available. Yeah. And you would wait for a certain time for it. Here we are creating a 30 seconds max wait limit. Yeah. It's a polling mechanism, not specific to Selenium. Polling can be found even in system automation. Let's say there was a registry entry going to be created or a service was supposed to be running, you can poll for it. This polling logic, in case the library doesn't provide, it's your responsibility to write it anyways. And then of course, the code gets complex. You have waiter.until, and then you put a condition like presence of element located, and then you send keys. Similarly, you use explicit waits to do everything. And the code suddenly gets even bulkier. This is production-oriented code, but it gets so bulky that it is no more an indicator. It establishes the need that you need a framework. So when your team looks at such code, or when you yourself look at such code and you want to write good code, you identify that I need a library to do these repetitive kind of things which Selenium asks you to do. And that's where you start writing a framework. At this stage, you take different decisions. Most of the decisions which I look at when test automators write frameworks is that they go for some kind of utilities. If you are in a Java world, typically I find code with static methods, lot of static methods, which are called frameworks. As a consultant, I have reviewed many of such frameworks, and I presented about it also, different problems in these frameworks. A typical code reduction, which I saw, was 85% and above. That's a large claim to make, but the truth is that every framework I touched had 85% unnecessary code in it. So one of my goals in Arjuna has been that how to write a framework which gets rid of such level of redundancy, which is seen so much in test automators codes. Okay, so this is the case which I wanted to build. I wanted to pick up a simple problem, basic form filling. and how the problems actually start from these basics. The problem here is also that these configuration variables are hard coded. You might think that this is not hard coding. This is already in a variable. But think about it. If you want to change it, every time you have to come to the script and then change it. That is a subtle form of hard coding as well. You would want to separate. One of the key things in a product or test automation is data separation. Data separation into files, data separation to come from some kind of interface like CLI or GUI, and Selenium has nothing to do with it. I'm going to build a case in this presentation that in any Selenium test automation framework, finally the automation code which is related to Selenium would not be more than 5 to 10%. 90% of the times you would be juggling with non-Selenium problems. Those who are already working with frameworks would have already realized it. And so to say that Arjuna is a Selenium wrapper or those things, it would be unfair. Unfair for any framework, any good framework actually, because 90% of that framework would be about, which has nothing to do with Selenium, but related to the problem of web UI automation because of the surrounding features which we need. Yeah. So I have to move to the next slide. Prantik, any questions, comments at this point?
Yes, sir. So there's a comment from Abhishek. He says a framework having 85% redundant code is not a framework itself.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I actually looked at a framework where this figure was 97% measured number. So it's a tall claim, I know, but these exist out there. And every single framework I've reviewed had a minimum of 80 to 85% reduction. Okay, so typically I when I talk to testers about it, I tell, okay, I'm not talking about your framework. I'm talking about some other framework. It's like a joke, right? When the joke is at somebody else, we enjoy it. But every person is biased. When we say experience, it's actually a lot of bias as well. I have experience of reviewing, and I'm extremely biased with the outcome of those reviews across different organizations, services companies, product companies, not just in India, by the way. This is the same story outside India as well. So yes, a framework which has 85% reduction, possible is not a framework. So, and thank you for saying that. Any other thing, Prantik?
There is one other question from Josley. It says, what are some blunders? Could you give some top issues?
I have a presentation on it. You can maybe find a YouTube video also. It's called Jugaad, the Jugaad automation story. So I have listed various problems, and believe me, so when I present about things and I look at people smiling, I know they're confessing. so whenever I have taken this talk to stage, I see a lot of smiles in the audience. Yeah. So there are some basic problems which are discussed there, which are very obvious, and then there are subtle problems. There are indirect messages which you can of course take from this presentation, and then I am open to discussing at length, of course. See, framework, I have always thought of it to create a training on it, and ended up on a realization that it can't be. You can't fit framework training into 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. It's a much, much longer thing to understand. It has taken for me also years and years of practice. So I can discuss some obvious points along the way. Today also I would, of course, give some hints. But this is not a presentation on discussing what are the key problems. Because for that, what I've realized is that test engine related problems are which cause most redundancy in test code. Yeah. So Josley, we can maybe catch up after the presentation as well. Yeah, sometime.
Great.
Any other comment, remark,
question? There's a question from Amit saying, is Arjuna wrapped over PyTest?
Yes. So I'll give you a background of that as well. I had written a complete test engine from scratch. It was called Unity. It was my 3 years of work. And over a period of time, realized that the focus on Unity was distracting me from writing higher level features. So although Unity became pretty strong as an engine, and I still consider it that it is extremely powerful and fills some of the gaps which PyTest has, and then lacking in other areas as well. But in the core features, it is a better engine than PyTest. But Arjuna could never pick up features because of the time. I can either develop Unity or Arjuna. So what I decided was I took a move away from Unity, and I have wrapped uh, Arjuna over PyTest as a test engine. But Arjuna is providing its own markup, and I'm sort of integrating it with PyTest features, whichever are crucial to provide. PyTest is extremely flexible and a great test engine. That's what my assessment is. It has too many options. So I looked at the web and what are the key things people struggle with, and I have tried to solve them in a consistent way, because one of the goals for Arjuna is consistency. And so you would. I'm not doing that comparison today, but maybe towards the end of the slide, I think there is an example of, and I would try to talk about PyTest at that point. Yeah. Any other question?
Yes, Rahul. So there's one question saying, any specific reasons of not wrapping Arjuna over Unity?
So as I mentioned, it wasn't a wrapping of Arjuna on Unity. Unity was a separate project when it started, and eventually it was actually a part of Arjuna itself as its engine. And the reason is time. One of the things, for example, was HTML reporting. And it was a feature which kept getting dragged and dragged and dragged, and I wasn't finding time to write that. And there were other similar things on which things were getting delayed just because of my decision of using Unity. And the wrapping over PyTest for now has given me a pace. I started it in January, this version of Arjuna, and already there's a production release out. It didn't take years for me. At some time in future, if PyTest is sort of becoming a blocker for me in expressing my ideas in the framework, so Arjuna is designed in a way that I can switch the engine at any point in time. So maybe in future I might do that without disturbing any of the test code people write. So when you write test cases with Arjuna, you're not directly dealing with PyTest. You are still dealing at Arjuna layer. So for me, it is very easy to move to Unity when Unity is fully capable and equivalent capabilities are there.
Great. Rahul, one other question by Manoj. What
Yep.
programming expertise is required to use Arjuna?
So Arjuna is, if you've worked in TestNG world, it's the same skill which you need for Java. Python is an easier language, but Arjuna is meant for production use. And I would say that beginner, see, it is like you're a beginner in coding, you come to Selenium, you write bad code. So similarly, if you're beginner to coding and you're experimenting with Arjuna, you would write just okay Arjuna code. As you improve in your coding, you would start exploring much more advanced features in Arjuna. So it's just like any other library, that the better you get at the core of coding, the better use you can make of Arjuna. But for getting started, it should be easier. You don't need to be a programming expert to get started with Arjuna.
Awesome. I think we're good for now, Rahul.
Okay. So I hope the problem statement is established, and it's not an anti-Selenium thing. It is good Selenium code, which you see on the screen, the way it should be. Now, at this point, either you create those utils, you have to do something about it, because this is two or three elements which you're dealing with. In a typical use case, when you automate, you might be dealing with 30, 40 elements like these. And you can imagine if you keep going on like this, what would be the size of the test? And still no test code is there. There are no assertions there. It is just interaction. So your code is going to become very, very large. So whenever you come across this nature of code in your work, where there is so much of redundancy and repetition of instructions, please do something. I'm not saying use Arjuna. Do something about it. in the way you want, but do something. This is not the way code should be written. Yeah, because it would be a maintainability nightmare for you over a longer run. Let's see how we do it in Arjuna. The same construct which you see on this particular slide, how it would look in Arjuna with basic usage. First problem which I want to solve, and to your maybe disappointment, is you thought I would talk about Selenium in the very next slide. I'm not. Because the first crucial problem in the previous code was hard coding of data. And that's a fundamental problem which we have to solve. And we have to, but Selenium cannot solve it for you. You have to come up with your own way. And it's not that test automators don't know about it. They come up with ways. Typically, they come up with a dot properties file, for example, in Java. And for simple needs, it is okay. It's a good first step that at least you identified that some of the data which is needed across your project is being hard-coded in scripts or code, and I want to separate it. It's a good first step, and you must take it. But in the projects which I've seen, as the project needs grow over time, a single properties file or .xml file or .json file or a .yaml file, an Excel file is the worst case, of course. It is not the solution for configuration. It grows over time. But then you have situations, let's say you have multiple test environments. The keys might remain same. For example, URL is your key. But the URL changes. For test environment, URL is different. For dev environment, URL is different. The user account might change. The port might change. In test environment, it might be HTTP. And in the production, when you run the same code against production, it is HTTPS. So small things start changing. But if your configuration is the same configuration, how do you deal with it? I'll tell you how people deal with it. They create multiple variables. They say let's say test environment URL, dev environment URL, and then they start writing if and else and all these conditions around it. So what was supposed to be a configuration problem is again converted into a coding problem. If else, if else, if else, switch. And one of the key reasons for redundancy in test automation code is switches and if else's. Problems which should have been contained within the framework are made test authors problems. Every time the test author checks what environment I'm running in, so I should use this variable instead of this variable instead of that variable. Is it iOS? Is it Android? If it is iOS, do this. If it is Android, do this. If it is desktop web, do this. These if and else's lead to a big bang of various methods. What should have been one function, now you have 10 functions, because OOP or object-oriented programming is also not in place. So this is the start. This is the code smell I look at, if-else's. The moment I see a lot of if-else's in test frameworks, I know there is something fishy. Yeah. So first problem which Arjuna solves is, and you can go through its documentation. If I have to talk about configuration system in Arjuna, I would need 2 to 3 hours, the kind of features it provides. You look at the doc, you would know what I'm talking about. It's a very, very advanced configuration system, which it provides. Usually Selenium automation frameworks don't talk about it at length or don't deal with the problem at length. I'll tell you some of them. First thing is that rather than a binary format or an XML format or a JSON format, I found YAML to be a much cleaner format, which is still, it provides a way of building hierarchy of options, giving complex data as configuration options. If you're using a dot properties file, for example, you can only provide simple data types, mostly strings actually, and then you do type conversions. But if you're using, so people resort to JSON or XML, which is too complex to edit. YAML is a good balance. You can have dictionaries or lists as values of configuration options provided very easily using its markup. So I chose YAML as the format for configuration in Arjuna. So what you see here is you have 2 sections. You can create a project.yaml, which represents your project level setting. You can create any number of configurations in Arjuna. You can create 1,000 configurations, and you can build one on top of another. What you see on the right is a tree that the configuration starts from one node and then it expands. You build 5 configurations from the root, and then maybe 5 configurations, 10 configurations, 10 configurations, like that. The problem of test automation configuration is that of a configuration tree. It's a tree problem which we are trying to solve using a single file. Not solvable. It would create if-else code at some point. So in Arjuna, configuration is solved as a tree. You can create a tree of configurations. This is a simple example. So you have something called Arjuna options. Arjuna has close to 100 configurable options. So you can configure them very easily here. And in case, and you would need that, user options means options which you want to define. Okay, app URL, username, password, whatever you want to define, you can also define it very easily. One of the other problems which I've seen in frameworks is that they might deal with their own option in a powerful way, but when it comes to your defined options, they cripple you. They provide you very basic facilities. But in Arjuna, I took this decision that whatever power is available for Arjuna options must be available for user-defined options. So they can be accessed in the same way. They have the same flexibility as built-in options. So you would not be able to even differentiate whether it is your option or Arjuna option. This is how integrated the options would become once you define them. Other thing is that this is a framework tip. Please consider that test authors humans. You are using machine formats as configurations. Dot properties is a machine format. .yaml is a machine format. .json files, XML files. These are machine formats. People make mistakes. These don't have really IDs or intelligence. So it means somebody might spell it with spaces around, or might spell it in camel case, uppercase, lowercase. Some basic mistakes have to be entertained by the framework while still not compromising on its behavior. Another case of redundancy which I found is this. Frameworks take, or test authors, they take out input from files. Then every time they do to lowercase dot trim, every string which they take, they start doing it. This should have been a framework feature, but they make it the responsibility of test author. You can look at your code, how many times you are doing to lowercase to trim, to lowercase to trim, to uppercase to trim. This should be a framework feature of making reference strings case insensitive. It should not be made a test author problem. Okay, that's the framework tip. Arjuna does it for you, because this is a common problem I identified across frameworks. So I'm done with this slide, Prantik. Any questions?
Yes, Rahul. So we have one question from Kunal. Says, how can we execute same script on multiple environment locally? Remotely, we can override the value when running from Jenkins.
So what you would want is, first step is data separation. The third is having contextual data or contextual configurations. So very small, simple way I can discuss with you. In Arjuna, anyways, this problem is handled. You can just say -c, just set the environment which you want, and you can have multiples of these environments and data configurations, and Arjuna clubs all the parameters together and gives you the right configuration which you want. Yeah, but it is a complex solution. I've solved it in Arjuna, but I can give you a simple way. What you should do is consider configuration at least as a multi-file problem, not a single file problem. Okay. And then when you have all test engines today, whether in Java world or C#, you have a command line which provides a way to give custom command line options. So your environment name should go in as the single variable. Based on this environment variable name, the appropriate configuration should be picked. What you should make sure is that the key names in configuration 1 and the key names in configuration 2 should be same, should be exactly same. You should not have environment 1 URL, environment 2 URL, environment 1 user, environment 2 user. Don't do that, please. URL, URL, user, user. Provide the environment name, and the framework should pick either environment 1 or environment 2 configuration. That's a simple, this if-else math should be done by the framework. Test author should not worry whether it was from environment 1 or environment 2. The tester would always get URL username. Okay, so no if-else in test code would be seen. Very simple tip. Yeah.
Yeah, Rahul, we have another question from Uday. It says, what is the preferable file type for input test data?
See, I have experimented with various formats. There is no definite answer for this, but I'll tell you my experience. I can tell you, please avoid binary formats. That I can tell you, as far as possible. Testers are fond of Excels. Okay, that's the reason I'm pointing it out. Testers are very, very fond of Excel files. What they don't realize is Excel is a binary format. So when you as a part of your code base, and in case you have matured and you are using a source control system like GitHub would not be able to differentiate binary files for you. So if you had Excel file version 1, which you updated as a part, let's say in a week, and now you have Excel version 2, GitHub cannot tell you the difference between, it can't diff binary files. So the way you're able to look at your code and know that, this change was made in line number this, who made it, you cannot do that. You can just know that the binary file was updated. So apart from binary file, when it comes to input data, please understand your need. If it is flat data, even a property file is fine. If it is a dictionary data and unordered is fine, you can use INI format, very simple format. If it is sort of a complex data that you have headers and then you have rows and you would want to build dictionaries out of it, I would prefer a CSV format or a tab delimited format. If you are doing web services automation and JSON is what you send finally, then why not use JSON as the input format itself? Yeah. XML, JSON, if you have a complex hierarchy of data, don't use JSON, please. It is very difficult to edit by hand. Use XML. But then better than XML for simpler structures, please use YAML. So I also juggle between these decisions, believe me. And what I do is in my frameworks, I try to support all. For configurations, I have imposed YAML. But for example, for data-driven testing, built-in options-wise, Arjuna supports Excel. Yes, it does support Excel because I know people need it. They're used to it. It supports INI. It supports CSV format, tab format, and more formats would be supported as well. So wherever you know that a flexibility of format would be needed, from framework perspective, add that provision. And it needs some design decisions when you do that. Please do not write code like Excel utils 1.java, Excel utils 2.java, Excel utils 3.java. That is the bad code. Okay, that even from reading from the same file with 2 lines of difference, people create 3-4 util files for that because every time they go to Google and copy paste the code. This please don't do. Apart from this, have a sense of like good code, look at code and try to understand code smells that it is bad code and try to do something better. That's what I also try to do. I'm not saying Arjuna is perfect code. Every time I look at it, I end up identifying something which I can do better. So this is Boy Scout rule from until time you touch your code, every time you see it, try to make it better. And over a period of time, you would find that your code gets cleaner. That's the only way. Otherwise, it goes the other way around. Yeah. So Safai Abhiyan or Swachh code is I think it should be our goal. Other questions?
Yes, Rahul. So there's one from Abhishek. He says, I have seen maintaining .properties file for each environment. With TestNG, many provide browser as a parameter or browser as a system environment variable. What is the effective way to provide these parameters?
So having multiple configuration files, see, browser as a parameter for environment is not a good choice in my opinion, because environments, unless you are defining a test environment, okay, So there is no fixed answer to your question. I'll give you an example. Let's say you are running your Selenium test remotely, and there is this Docker, which is downloadable with Selenium service running. And let's say you've configured one Docker with Firefox, one with Chrome, and so on and so forth. In such case, first of all, mentioning the browser may not be even useful, because that particular Docker is always going to launch that browser. But let's say in that hub or in a remote machine, you have choices. And you're describing, by environment, you mean your machine which is running the test as the environment. Yeah. In that case, browser as a variable for that might make sense. So you have to spend time on understanding your exact need. And when you move from one project to another, believe me, this need could change, because the project is different, the way environment is set up, some of your definitions might change around things. So assess your need. The variable, any variable for that matter, should go into the configuration file where it is needed, and it should belong there. So that's why don't treat it as a single file problem. You're already looking at a good decision that you have different .property files for different environments. So going along with that, you can also identify what are the things which are common across these environments. If things are common across environments, it is not an environment configuration. You can remove them and move to some kind of central format on top of which these environment configurations are superimposed. So that way your maintenance also becomes easier, and you would clearly know what is environment dependent and what is environment independent. Okay, so no fixed answer to you. You are in a good place where you are thinking these things, and you would arrive at good answers for your requirements.
Great. Rahul, we have another question from Sunny.
Yeah.
It says, in Arjuna, how do we run tests in parallel? Also, does Arjuna take care of thread safety of WebDriver, or test author has to take care of it?
Could you repeat the question, the last sentence, please? Last question.
So it says, in Arjuna, how do we run tests in parallel? Also, does Arjuna take care of thread safety of WebDriver?
Okay. So I'll give you, although not a topic of this presentation, I'll give you a brief idea. In Arjuna, you have, so in PyTest doesn't have a concept or equivalent of test-ng's suite.xml. Okay, there is no way you can write or define such things in PyTest. It's always a single run, and you can maximum choose tests, what to run in that test. And then it provides xdist as a library, where it uses multiprocessing. In Arjuna, what I've done is I have developed a format which is equivalent but not same as testng.xml. You can define a test session. In a test session, you can define sequential stages. These are called stages. And within a stage, you can have multiple groups of tests. These groups of tests can run in sequence or in parallel. Okay, so you have a session, and you can define any number of pre-configured sessions. Sessions can have stages. In each stage, you can have groups. These groups you can run in parallel or sequentially. Now, each group is always run in its own thread, always. And for each thread of execution, that is where Arjuna launches PyTest to execute it. So Arjuna is not a simple wrapper on PyTest. Arjuna launches PyTest for each test group, and if configured, as a parallel thing. So the only place where you configure threads in Arjuna is when you have a stage. So at stage, you tell which are the groups which you want to run in. So how many threads, what is the thread pool size basically to run this? Now, when it comes to thread safety, because of this architecture of Arjuna, most of the time you do not have to worry about thread safety. However, if your tests are written in a manner that across your tests, you're sharing an object, and let's say for some reason you launch threads from your test itself, then you might have to take care of thread safety yourself. What I'm working on in Arjuna is that I have created some decorators, because in Java world, it's still easier. You have thread locals, you have synchronized kind of keywords. They are absent in Python. So in case you want to do thread safety in Python, it is more difficult than Java world. So what I've done from my side is, and I use it internally within the framework also, that I'm building simple decoratives in Python, that if you want to make a method, let's say thread safe, you can just mark it as at synchronized or something like that. Okay, so I can give provisions, but as a test author, what I must tell you is, do not shy away from thread safety. A framework can minimize the need, but it can't take away the complete responsibility of thread safety ever. So as you go along, build knowledge about basic thread safety and how to do it in the language which you are using. Yeah, and do it in an efficient way. Many of the people don't know that if you have static utils class, right, that you have a class and then you have these 100 static methods and you have marked them as synchronized because you're new to thread safety. Whenever one method gets locked and it is synchronized and it's static, all the methods get locked. And then people say that their test automation framework has slowed down. Of course, it would slow down because for unrelated method calls, you're locking everything. Yeah. So when you go for thread safety, things get trickier. Arjuna tries to minimize it for you with its architecture, but does away with the total need. That would be a very tall claim to make. I'm not making that.
Great. I think Rahul, in the interest of time, we'll move forward with the presentation.
All right. All right. Okay. So I hope the configuration, you see, configuration is an important subject. This looks like we are talking of Selenium, but the first thing which you would want to enter using Selenium is username password, basic things, right? The problem actually starts from data separation, not Selenium at all, when you're doing Selenium-based automation. That's the thing which we have to digest, absorb, that when I say I'm doing Selenium-based automation, 90% of my work is non-Selenium. Please accept this fact right away upfront rather than realizing it months and years down the line. It would save you a lot of time, and you would, if you're building something of your own, if you're creating a framework of your own, you would end up creating a much better framework, yeah, rather than doing those improvements later. All right, let's look at Selenium code. Arjuna, as of now, uses Selenium as the underlying browser engine, browser automation engine. But Arjuna is designed in a way that 2 years down the line, let's say there is a new engine which comes up, which is written in Python, of course, and it's better than Selenium. I can switch to that engine anytime without you changing your test code. That's the architecture of Arjuna. It decouples Arjuna's own layer from the engine using a concept of a dispatcher. So I'll just need to write a new dispatcher and your tests would run over a new engine. That's the architecture. So let's look at it. First of all, the difference which you'll find is the simplified imports. You can just say from Arjuna import star, and whatever are the public names which you're supposed to use, unless you're into deep experiments with Arjuna, would be made available to you. So these names are available in a package in Arjuna called TPI, or Testers Programming Interface. All the names become available to you. The other difference which you'll see is you never talk in terms of browser engine. When you're doing GUI app automation, you talk to Arjuna in terms of GUI app, not GUI app automata. So first step, you create a GUI app, you launch it, and there are various factory methods. I'm just showing element method here, which is sort of, you can think of equivalent of web element in Selenium, but it is generic. So tomorrow, if I add support for Appium, this is still going to remain element. You're not going to deal with mobile element, for example. Yeah. So app.element, and then you can provide your identifiers. Selenium has 8 basic identifiers: ID, class name, yeah, link text, partial link text. All of them are supported. But Arjuna also provides you higher level identifiers. If you remember the XPath which you had written here, by.xpath input contains sub. In Arjuna, if you have to express equivalent of that, which is partial link text matching XPath, you just say text is equal to sub. Arjuna would convert this into its equivalent XPath and run it. There are many other situations where Arjuna provides you higher level identifiers. For example, there is something called by JavaScript. Yeah. So you can write a custom JavaScript for identification, just provide it, and Arjuna would identify the element using it, and you can use it just the way as usual. You can give coordinate-based identification also. So there are higher level identifiers which Arjuna provides. These are pretty well documented with good example code, so you can find that out. So other thing to look at it is, there is no weight, which you see here. In Selenium, there are two concepts. One is implicit weight, one is explicit weight. I'm not using implicit weight here. Those, if you're thinking of that, no, I'm not using implicit weight in Arjuna. There is no implicit weighting. I am using explicit weight, but you don't see it here because the concept in Arjuna is contextual weighting. It's neither implicit weight, it's not explicit weight, it's contextual weight. What it means is, I'll tell you, when you find an element from framework, automatically you can assert for its presence. You cannot know whether it is going to be visible or it is going to be clickable or enabled in the language of Selenium. But when you click it, let's say you click a button, the framework can know that you are trying to click it. If your action on the element is clicking, it means at this point in time, the state of this element should be clickable. This is what I call contextual. Yeah. So Arjuna waits for something based on your interaction with it. Yeah, it uses it doesn't use Selenium's explicit weight or implicit weight. Even it doesn't make calls to it. Arjuna has its own weighting logic built into it. Yeah, I have written weighting logic from scratch to make it more flexible. So when you say app.element of id email dot text, this is again Python construct here, is equal to C of username. There's a lot which happens in this single line. First of all, you're trying to find an element with ID equal to email. At this stage, the dynamic wait triggers because you're trying to find it. So it means the max Arjuna can wait for is its presence. But at next stage, you are saying dot text, which is sort of dot set text, yeah, in other languages. You're trying to set its text to username. So at this point, Arjuna identifies that possibly you are dealing with a text box and or some similar control to which send keys can be done, and it must be clickable. So it waits for its state to be clickable before it interacts. There is a third thing which is absent across frameworks. What if the click fails? Yeah, especially in Angular JS frameworks, I come across this thing. You clicked it, but it didn't click it because there is this interactivity exception which is raised. But if you had tried second time clicking, it might have succeeded. Similarly, if you're setting text, you had this long string, it actually entered just this because of some state issues. So Arjuna also tries to wait for the outcome that you wanted to set text to A, B, C, D, E, F, but only ABC was entered. So it retries set text till the final outcome is A, B, C, D, E, F. This is what I call contextual waiting. After this also automation might fail, but it sort of minimizes flakiness of tests or interactions for some unknown reason at that point in time. Okay. If it fails after, let's say, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever you configure, of course, the test is going to fail. Okay. Other things is the C of user.name. Arjuna has magic methods, 3 magic methods, C, L, and R. C is for config. Of course, there are elaborate named methods. You can say arjuna.getConfig of user.name. But when you say C of user.name, you are essentially telling Arjuna that please pull the configuration option called user.name. I had earlier shown you Arjuna options project.yaml. So in case you are using this configuration itself, it would have pulled it from user options user.name. You can also associate, you can tell Arjuna to, there's a query language in Arjuna. So let's say your configuration name is env1. If you say C of env1.user.name, Arjuna would know that you're not trying to pull a configuration option from a central file. You're trying to pull it from a configuration which is called env1. So it would pull it from there and give it to you. Okay. So you can, this is pretty extensively documented in Arjuna documentation. You can go through it. So, but this is the first stage of code which would appear in Arjuna. Okay. So before I move forward, any questions at this stage? Because we are going to do better than this.
Yes, Rahul, there are a few questions. Would you like to take it now or towards the end of the session? Because few people have check on the time.
People have checked on the time. So it's already 12:15. So how do we move forward? Do we have a session 2?
Yeah, we can have a session 2. So a few people have a question of, do they get to see the demo as well?
I can give the demo, but then what would they see is the question. Okay.
I think we can go ahead with the presentation, Rahul, as you have already prepared. And
okay, maybe I'll try to record a video and put on YouTube. Yeah, so that because demos typically, yeah, I can run it now, but then I have to explain it also. And web automations, they run pretty fast, so there would be nothing to see. All right. So what I'll do is, I hope I've set the ground. There was a question earlier that what level of knowledge in coding would I need? Yeah. The thing is that if you are new to coding, the code which you see on the screen right now is the level of code which you would end up writing. Beyond this, what I'm discussing, you have to build your coding skills. Okay. So that's what. So this is basic Python code. There is nothing advanced which you're doing in this code. All right. So a framework tip for you: make contextual weights as default. Okay, not basic weights. Don't use implicit weights, please, as far as possible. How can we do it in Arjuna? Can we do it better? Yes. There is still hard coding. Your IDs are still hard coded. Text is hard coded. IDs everywhere. So the way you separate your data, you must separate your identifiers also. Okay. So Arjuna has built-in support for that. Again, in a YAML format, you can have labels defined so that you can refer to it by name: home, email, password, submit, dash. These are elements which you're defining, and then you can externalize your locators. One thing which I forgot to mention is Arjuna supports an OR relationship between locators. So if you say ID equal to this, name equal to this, text equal to this, Arjuna is going to try for all of these locators one after another. But here's the thing, within the same time limit. So if you use multiple locators as alternatives, the maximum wait time is not going to increase. Yeah. So this is again a key feature which people try to build in the framework. Arjuna has it. One key thing which I want to bring to your attention is, please do not start by externalizing locators, but don't stop there. You can do better. For example, if you see here, there's a load section. You can define an anchor element. What it means is that if this particular YAML file, let's say it's associated with the page, when that page loads, Arjuna is automatically going to wait for an anchor element. It considers that you want it to wait for this particular element to load so that it is considered that the page has loaded completely. Selenium does not do this by itself. Selenium has very basic mechanisms that it looks for, let's say, body, whether it is attached to the DOM or not. And once it is done, it says page is ready. At that stage, what Arjuna does is that it tries to wait for ready state. Whenever you go to a URL, it tries to wait for ready state in addition to what Selenium is doing. If you want to do something beyond that, you can define anchor element. Yeah. Other thing which you might notice is there is this max weight 120. What it means that you have defined a central weight, but what if for a certain element you want to wait longer or shorter? You can externalize that also. There are other configuration settings which you can externalize in this format. So it is not simple localizer or locator externalization. You are externalizing metadata for an element or a page. It would lead to a lot of code reduction when you write your automation code. Okay, so framework tips: find a way to externalize locators. Step 1, choose a non-binary format. Please don't use Excel for this, please, for the same reason which I talked about source could control. Step 2, make it more than locator externalization. Okay. Framework, the tip 3, develop higher level locators. You can look at Arjuna for examples. You can at least pick up those concepts, try to do something equivalent in your work, in your frameworks as well, like text. One of the things which you would find is that I focus on what people do most of the times and make them as the default. Selenium has by.link text and by.partial link text. So when I had to develop Arjuna's higher level identifier, let's say text, I had to choose between should I write it as an equivalent of partial link text or XPath, which corresponds to that, or link text. What I identified is when most of the times testers actually want partial match, not full match. So when I created higher level locators, the text in Arjuna means partial match. Full text means full match. So these are small decisions which you should consider when building frameworks. It would go a long way. That what should be the default behavior when a method is called. Okay, and then provide alternatives or provide overriding behaviors. If you have externalized the file, and now if you want to use it in your Arjuna code, your code would start looking like this. So you see your identifiers are externalized. GNS is called GUI namespace in Arjuna. Okay, so every app has a GUI namespace associated with it. So you can say app.gns, and now .email means the email which you defined in your YAML file. It is going to identify it for you as a result of the single dot. And now you can say .text and use it as earlier. Very simple, very intuitive, no page factories code. Yeah. Please compare this with the page factory code which you have been writing. Yeah. What you did was you just defined a file in a place and associated it with GUI app by saying label equal to app. There's a lot of association logic which Arjuna triggers at the background because it has a fixed project structure. And apart from that, you had to just convert your previous .element code to using this. And you can still make .element calls. It's not that because you have defined a YAML file, now you must use it. It's not that way. You can mix and match also. But you don't have to write a lot of factory code, loadable component, add this, add find by. You don't have to do anything. Arjuna does it automatically for you. Okay. If you are a Python coder attending this session, you would understand that I am overloading the dot here, which is an advanced Python thing to do. If you are doing this, please be very careful. I burned my hands. Now it is stable, extremely stable, but there is a complexity involved in this construct. So if you want to hack the dot in Python, plan well. Okay, I didn't, so that's why I'm talking to you. Any questions at this stage?
No new questions, Rahul.
All right. Okay. So see, till this point, whatever points I discussed were critical, and now on onwards, what I discussed in the body of a simple presentation. Anyways, we can't discuss that. But let me show you some possibilities. Should we stop at this stage, or can we do better in Arjuna? The answer is we can do better. Let's do that. What if you're dealing with applications which are localized? There's a German version of it. There's a French version of it. There's an English version of it. Now, in web UI automation, it's not just data which has to be localized. You might have text-based identifiers, the name of a link, which also changes to German, right? So you might find a way of mapping and building a dictionary, but how do you associate that information with your code also, or with your identifiers also? So this is a problem frameworks. I haven't heard of a problem of a framework which is public, open source out there, which solves this problem for you. Sahi solves this problem, by the way, but it's a commercial tool. So in Arjuna, I decided to solve that problem because right now, the place where Arjuna is in production usage, it's a German organization which has applications in like 15 languages, and I had to solve this problem. So if you look at this text equal to l.login.submit text, in the single construct, you told Arjuna that I want the localized text, which can be found using login.submit.text. So the L dot prefix tells to Arjuna that you want to localize it. And it would be automatically localized. This string would be converted into an XPath because you have used text equal to this. And then when you do a gns.email.text, what would be entered is a localized text. All of this happens in the background for you. Yeah. So that's what Arjuna does for you. And there's a third concept called reference. So CLR, C for config, L for localized, R for reference. I would not touch reference thing because it would again divert us. One automation tip I can give to you is, please, if you're dealing with an application which is going to be localized and you know it upfront, if not today, tomorrow, please, as far as possible, do not use text-based identifiers. Yeah, as far as possible. Link text, partial link text, XPaths which use text, because you would have to localize everything. And when you use localization, your partial text matches stop working, because it's not a word-to-word localization. If you have a sentence and it is getting localized into a, let's say from English to French, you can't really have same partial part picked up from here and there. Complete sentence has to be used. So suddenly your partial text matches for longer phrases, they stop working. So as an automation tip, irrespective of any tool, any framework, minimize text-based locating. You can't avoid it. I know that you have to assert messages, successful login message, for example, but try to minimize it. So, questions at this stage?
Yeah, Rahul, we have one from Abhishek.
Yep.
What is the source of localization engine?
What is the source? It means from where it is picking it up.
Yes.
So, okay. So as of now, Arjuna supports 2 formats for localization. Maybe more can be added over time. Maybe Arjuna can start to allow plugins also for this. So Excel is supported. I was consulting for Sharp India, so I've built various solutions for them. So Excel is the format which the dev team was using. So I have built an equivalent solution in Arjuna. And in another team, JSON is being used, which is a typical format in Angular JS apps or today's web frameworks. So JSON is also supported as a format for localization. Yeah, and it is documented, and there is some example code existing in the Arjx project. So you can refer that. Okay. Other question?
Yes, there's one question from Shikhar. He says, I have around 15 to 20 columns and around 500 rows of test data in Excel. How do you suggest to move in other format? I have created a framework like it will check number of rows and run same test cases again for each row with test data in that row. Is the scenario handled here?
So I don't know the context in which you're using it. I can tell you some patterns which I've seen. People confuse data-driven testing with data separation. Okay. Thing which I would look when I look at your problem would be to understand, do you have the problem of data-driven testing or data separation? Okay, just with this single question, I can't understand that. I'll tell you the difference. Data separation is simple. You are separating your data from your test, and from your test, you ask for the data. I call it data referencing, not data driven. Data driving is when you from outside the data drives your logic. And you should have at least like 5 records, 10 records, 20 records to drive your test. Same logic of test using multiple records. I call that as a data-driven testing. Otherwise, you have data separation. So I don't know what is in your Excel. Typically, I see testing teams that they put all their data somewhere else, and then when they have to drive a test, as per the test, they pick up a row from that Excel. Every time that Excel is read over and over again, actually, and then it reaches a particular row index or a particular column to pick the data, and then associate the test with that data. This is not data driving, so that we are clear. Okay, this is data separation. Which format you would use, again, it depends on the nature of your data and how complex it is. Are you trying to flatten a hierarchical data into a row because you had Excel as the choice? I don't know, but it has a longer answer. I've discussed some tips around it also, that separate what is common from what is specific. Are you dealing with the problem of data separation, Or are you dealing with the problem of uh, data driving? I have seen a 40,000 line for loop, which was created because of a situation which you have. I hope you're not on that track. The Excel had these many lines, like 10,000 lines or 9,000 lines, and then 38,000 line for loop to deal with that Excel file to do data driven testing. So I hope you're not into that trap. So carefully look at it, and maybe sometime we can catch up and discuss further. Okay. Till I understand your problem fully, I can't comment beyond this. Yeah. Any other question?
No, we can move forward.
All right. So can we do better? So corresponding to this, I can't really discuss in a short 2-3 minutes. We can move. You might have heard about page object model. Page object model, for all its practicality, is not good for production in its simple format. So what I've identified is that in a medium to large complexity app, you first have an app, then you have page. These pages they follow templates. You have a top navigation bar, you have a left navigation, you might have a sidebar, or you might have a table format, or you might have an angular grid, you might have an angular tab section, mat tab, group, whatever. So you find that every application today is created using building blocks. These building blocks are small widgets, which are bundled into bigger widgets, which becomes a page, and then pages become an app. And then there are dialogues. Yeah. So in Arjuna, what I've tried to do is I have tried to support all of these. There are 4 first-class GUIs in Arjuna. I call all of these as GUIs. App, which we saw so far, is a GUI app. GUI page is a GUI. GUI dialog is a GUI. And GUI widget or GUI section is a GUI. So you can build very complex models by saying, this is my app, this has these pages, this page has these sections, and these are app level dialogues or page level dialogues. You can represent all of these as first class objects in Arjuna, and then build your complex transition model. To each of these, you can associate a YAML file separate or using your central app file as a backup plan. So all of this is handled for you by Arjuna. And you can have root element defined for a page section. So nested element finding kicks in. So there are many, many, many Selenium integrities which you have to deal with as you grow with your framework. Arjuna tries to solve them. Rather than giving you a list of 100 features in Arjuna, what I've tried to do is I've picked each problem and built something comprehensive around it. Okay. So app page section dialog model, actually it is referred to, that you can use one or more of these, bundle them together and write your code using WordPress as an example application. Some example code, a lot of example code actually exists in the RGX project in the GitHub repository. So you can refer that and we can even discuss around that. So the code which is shown here is that you've represented an app. When you launch the app, it gives you a home page. And on the home page, when you do a login with default creds, it gives you the dashboard page. So typical page transitions, and then section is not shown here for simplicity's sake. There are dialogues which are not shown here, but in the example code, you could look at that as well. If I had to show that example, the Selenium code I had shown at the beginning would have been really crazy. So I picked up a very simple flow. Tip for you, move to page object model wherever possible, but basic page object model, not optimal. Maybe for mobile app automation, it is okay. But for today's web applications, imagine Amazon, imagine Facebook, imagine Stack Overflow, basic page object model, not usable. You have to do some kind of complex OP, and Arjuna tries to solve that problem for you. Yep. Questions?
No, Rahul, we're good for that.
Okay. And I think this is the last one. So far we have discussed about Selenium. So you see, Selenium's code was something at its core. We talked of page object model, configuration, localization. Typically, these are non-Selenium problems to solve in your framework. The other part is there was a question regarding PyTest. PyTest is a test engine. Selenium is a browser interaction library. browser automation library. It's not a testing library. So when you write a test automation framework, you need both. You need a test engine to define your tests. It governs, or it actually dictates how your tests would look like. So this choice must be made very carefully. And then you club it with Selenium, or let's say in Java world, you say rest assured, you club with rest assured to do web services automation, or with the network automation library to do network automation. So this is typically decoupled and should be decoupled in a test automation framework. If you look at this particular slide, when you say for module, so PyTest has a concept of test fixtures. In Arjuna, these are called resources. And you can, rather than saying at pytest.fixture of scope is equal to module, you can just say at for module. So you're telling Arjuna that I'm creating a resource and I want it at a module level created once. Yeah. Or I want to create a resource for the test, which should be created for each test or for the group. And you can have all these defined in the test module itself, or you can define it centrally as per the Arjuna's project structure. Okay, for which in Python you have to do some PyTest, you have to do some more things. But in Arjuna, the moment you place it there, they become available to your project. These are subtle problems which I've tried to solve with Arjuna. Yeah? So at module, you're saying home, and you say default equal to true, so that it becomes applicable to all the test functions here. And then you create the resource which you want, you yield it, which is a Python keyword, and then the tear down instruction or the cleanup instruction for that resource is also put in same method. If you are from TestNG world, you should recognize that you usually have at before, at after class, at. So you write two methods for each fixture. Yeah. In Arjuna, you write one method for a resource, which has the setup and tear down instructions in the same method. So the section before the yield is setup. You return it if you want to, and then you clean it up. So everything is together, so no confusion. And of course, if you want to write a test, you just say at test. And if you sort of have a test function, you say check underscore as the prefix there. Yeah. So this is simple thing. I found this clubbing of setup and tear down in a single method, very powerful concept. And it is not available in PyUnit test. It is not available in TestNG. It is not available in JUnit 5. It is something which I found in PyTest and I loved it. And then I found that doing it in PyTest, some of its markup, you have to write a lot of decorators at this, at this, at this, and at this. I have tried to club all of those features, which were critical, into a single decorator wherever possible. So at for module for resources, and at test is a decorator, which is Arjuna's decorator. And it provides, this is the simplest usage. It's an extremely powerful decorator, which gives you a lot of features from PyTest in the same construct, rather than you remembering what to install, which plugin to install. This should take this type of syntax, that should take that type of syntax. It doesn't, you don't have to know that. On that note, I'll just give you highlights of some other features. Arjuna is more than these as well. There's a comprehensive CLI with the help to trigger the tests. Logging facilities Arjuna provides to you. And there's a concept called contextual logging, which is under development, so that you can control, let's say you want to log only configuration settings. So you can just tell that log configuration. So it's an advanced concept which is missing in frameworks, which is under development and being, it exists, it is being sort of made more robust in the upcoming versions. Data-driven testing, doc, for example, Arjuna has single record, multi-record, data function generator, data class, and parameterized classes, parameterized data functions, and many data sources, like all of these clubbed together, data files, Excel, INI, all these facilities built in for you. HTML reporting is auto-generated, auto-screenshot on failure. There's a project structure which is well documented for consistency across projects, high-level identifiers. And yes, you can define your own identifiers in Arjuna. On top of these things, let's say you have a form in which form control is an attribute, form control name, and it repeats. So you can create your own identifier form control name and use it later. Okay, so very advanced. It's called withx, with extended. So very easy to do it and make it available across your project just by editing a YAML file. DOM parsing, This is another powerful feature. When you have a table in, let's say, HTML, and you want to check all its rows for contents, you want to validate it. The code which test authors write is they every time ask from Selenium. So let's say there were 40 such calls made. 40 times you're asking from the browser for data. It is going to be extremely slow automation. So what Arjuna does is that you ask whatever element you want to ask for, get its code. Arjuna provides you it as an XML node, and you can run XPath on it locally without ever talking to browser after that. Okay, so it would be possibly 100 times faster than doing it with Selenium. There is no dependency apart from Arjuna. When you install Arjuna, it installs all its dependencies on its own. So no Maven maintenance for you or those things, or equivalent of that in Selenium. It's aligned with Python's future. 3.6 plus is what we use with Arjuna, and Python 3 is the future thing. Python 2 is end of life, so no support available. So it is future ready, and supports with its all this flexibility. You can run tests in Docker Selenium or run locally, run multi-threaded. You can do all of that. On that note, the formal part of this presentation is over, and as a last tip, please do not complicate easy stuff when building a framework. Keep it easy or easier, but complex features, they must be made approachable. And as test authors, please do not expect complex features to be made easy for you. The frameworks which target that are brittle. They can never become generic frameworks. So these are two sort of contradicting goals which I have in Arjuna, that try easy things as easy or easier and make complex or complicated stuff approachable. These are the two key goals under which I'm developing Arjuna for you. So thank you very much for your time, and I can take any questions now.
Yeah, Rahul. So I think we had one question. Yeah, so there's a question from the group. Right?
From?
AI integration Jenkins possible with Arjuna?
Yes. So for Jenkins integration, what you need is, there is a, after I moved to parallel execution, there's a small hiccup which I'm dealing with, because it's a recent move. When you do Jenkins integration of any test automation framework, you need three things, okay? One, CLI, a command line interface through which you can control. You should have precise control of what you run. Arjuna has that. It has a very, very advanced CLI. Part one, solved. Part two, Jenkins has these plugins which understand JUnit output format of report XML. So your framework must produce that XML format, JUnit style report format. Arjuna does that by default. So point two, tick mark. Point three, some weeks back, it was there, which is that when your framework exits, yeah, so it has finished and it exits, it should exit with the proper exit code. Jenkins, from the way it marks the build as passed or failed, right, red or green, is based on the exit code of the test framework process. So the moment I moved from launching PyTest as multiple executions for each test group, the logic which as of now I have to introduce in, so Jenkins integration you can do, I'm talking of precise integration, which is a to-do feature for me now, that when these PyTest processes, let's say you have three groups, they exited with certain codes. What Arjuna needs to do, and is absent right now, is assess across these three PyTest children that what were their exit codes. If any of them exited with the failed code, then Arjuna must exit with the failed code as well. So this logic yet to be written, but maybe a week away or something. So in short answer, yes, you can integrate.
Great.
It has already been tried, by the way. The code is in production. So Jenkins integration is in place there.
Awesome. Rahul, the next question from Kunal. He says, when we make any changes to files which are part of the project, we need to commit it so everyone has updated data. Why not use DB instead?
Why not use DB instead for? For which part?
I believe it's for the changes to files. Kunal, can we have a follow-up explanation to your question while we take up the other questions?
Okay, so I'll what I've understood from the question, I'll answer now. And in case it doesn't answer your question, you can ask again. DB is a good choice, but you don't typically put your configurations, basic needs in DB. Okay, so DB is a good input format when you have relational data. But every requirement, if you start making it a DB problem, there would be hiccups along the way. There is a benefit to configurations which you can track in a source control system. You can't track DBs when changes were made. It's not easily traceable. So simpler things, you typically go for files. For complex relational data, or no SQL data, when you have large data needs or something, you go there. So I've seen that usage, but for every file need, you don't make it a DB problem. Yeah. Next question.
Okay. Then we have a question from Ravi Surya. He says, Arjuna for Java supports same capabilities as supported by Arjuna written for Python.
Arjuna Java is deprecated. So it is one of those decisions around Arjuna which I've taken in 7-8 years. This is like the 7th or 8th time I've implemented Arjuna, and I'm going to stick to it now. So Arjuna Java, which Ravi is mentioning, is last year's project, where I became very ambitious. I wanted to have a multi-language framework in place. The experiment was successful, by the way. So at that time, what was happening is there's an Arjuna Java client binding, just the way Selenium has. And then Arjuna core was written in Python. So Java code could send REST packets. So it was a framework as a service concept. And it succeeded, by the way. It was working. So it's not that I left the project because the idea wasn't good. Idea was good, but it cannot be a single man project. So I tried to involve the community as well there. Nothing happened around that, but work has to go on. So I dropped that idea and moved to a pure Python concept of Arjuna. So Arjuna Python today does much more than the last year's concept, which Ravi you're referring to. Okay, and you would find a difference in speed. You would find a difference in features. A lot of feature set, new features. So I would suggest that as a reference point, you can refer to the previous project, but for practical production needs, please stick to Arjuna Python now onwards.
Great. So there's a next question from Jacob. So he says, is there any blog resource of yours which talks about approaches of designing complex web apps?
Which?
Approaches of designing complex web apps.
I'm not a developer, so not the right person to talk on web apps. See, with respect to testing for complex apps, my work is usually available in conference talks or the way we are doing webinars. It's more of a time crunch, so I'm sorry, not much is out there. So.
Okay. And then there's a follow-up question by Jacob again, which says, normally the advice is that automation framework should be in the line of the code used for development. How can we justify the usage of a Python-based framework?
Okay. I'll tell you one thing. We have been borrowing test engines from developer world for decades now. JUnit, not a good test engine for testers. So there's a reason people are using TestNG. So just because, for example, devs still use JUnit, but in the same teams, TestNG might be used because TestNG caters to testers' need much better. Testers' needs for test frameworks are very different from what the developers need. The kind of control which we need, the kind of output which we want. Yeah, developers are typically okay with the command line output, just the console output basically. But testers are expected to provide fancy reports and integrations and Jira integration and that integration and email integration and whatnot. So needs are very different. And when a tester picks up developers framework and tries to solve problems, testers don't have the dev skills, first of all. And the features which are being asked needs a lot of coding skills to build them. So my advice is always that there's a certain benefit to what you mentioned, Jacob, that if the developers and testers use the same framework, use same tech, same coding languages, it has a certain benefit. But typically in the black box testing world, this is very superficial. And skill-wise, if you try to find TypeScript people today, just because you're using AngularJS, try to do a community, let's say, some kind of survey, and try to see how many testers really know TypeScript. So if the application is done in TypeScript and you force testers to use TypeScript, they would write extremely poor code. We testers, we have a longer journey, tougher journey when it comes to code. And we should not make that too complex for them. And that is what is happening in the world, by the way. When languages are being imposed on testers rather than what they are comfortable at, very bad test automation frameworks are resulting. So I know Agile is the game, but then it has these side effects also.
Yeah, so the
Next question.
Rahul, is from Josley Anson. One, he says, what advantages do we see over existing robot framework also built on Python?
I have not done that comparison. One key comparison I can give to you is, if you love keyword-driven testing, please go for robot framework. If you are into coding, please forget robot framework. Arjuna would serve you much better. Arjuna is geared currently at testers who want to write tests using code, not higher level abstractions. There are certain use cases where these keyword driven tests or gherkin oriented cucumber style tests, they don't serve your need. If you are into that space, although robot might allow you, but I don't think so it would do it as powerful as Arjuna. We can do that comparison of, so it would not be fair to make such generic remarks, but maybe I'm too biased after seeing so many problems. And I have to sell Arjuna also to you, right? So till I as the creator won't tell you, then who's going to talk about Arjuna apart from me? So give Arjuna a try. Pick a problem of web UI automation, solve it with robot framework, solve it with Arjuna, and see the difference.
Okay. Yeah. So the next question is from Chandan. He says, any record and playback scriptless features available?
No.
Okay.
I'll tell. So Chandan, I'll tell you, some of the frameworks actually they do it, trying it out. But Pradeep was on the call, and some of you might be old timers like me. Windrunner was the game back in 2004, 2000, when I started with automation. Okay, then QTP was newly introduced at that time. Yeah, record and playback has never worked, never. 2 decades now. That's what we have been realizing. The record playback doesn't work, and now it is being sold to you as 5th generation automation. Something which failed in 1st generation can't be your 5th generation solution, right? So please stay away from marketing gimmicks. Tell me one tool in which record playback worked for you. When you record and playback, it's a good experimental tool, maybe good way to identifying, locators for you. But finally, when you write production code, it would always be handwritten, at least for now. Okay, maybe simpler problems, it works, but medium to complex problems, record playback doesn't serve you. You would have to write code. And the other thing is that in case you're using record playback also, typically record playback gives you raw code. Okay, take that raw code, take help from those tools, write Arjuna code. What's the harm in that? Yeah, but so far, no record playback kind of provisions. And not targeted as well, by the way. Not my goal.
Great. Okay, so moving on to the next question again from Chandan is, can Arjuna be integrated with tools like Jira?
Yes, Arjuna can be integrated. So I love the way this question was put, because usually the questions come my way is it integrated? Okay, so it is not possible for a framework to integrate with everything and only then people start making use of it. Can you integrate it? Yes. And in that integration, if you, for example, write your own library, which can talk to Jira, and you want to use it in a certain way with Arjuna, if you are not able to do that, please get in touch. And in case there's a piece missing from Arjuna, which can help with your module and then, integrating with the rest of the pieces, I would build that myself in a way that it is generic enough that other people can also use it. Okay, so yes, it can be integrated, and not just Arjuna. Any framework can be integrated. The level of redesign which is needed could differ. In Arjuna, it can be done with minimum kind of effort. That I can tell you, because of its architecture.
Awesome, great. So I think we'll take a question from Divya. So Divya has asked, does Arjuna supports rerun of failed test?
That's a feature which is supported by PyTest. Okay. As of now, in Arjuna, it is not available. It is something which I want to investigate, especially because Arjuna launches multiple instances of PyTest. So the way PyTest does it is that when it does a test run, it caches the results as a part of your project. You can see cache directories. And then when you rerun it and you pass it the instruction, then it sort of matches with that cache and makes its choices. So a to-do item for me, this is a feature in to-do list for me, is I want to check that if in a single project, you, let's say, launched 4 PyTests in parallel because you had 4 test groups, how is the cache maintained by PyTest? And in this environment, am I able to even make that choice? Because I want to provide the feature if it is deterministic. Otherwise, Arjuna should just say, I can't provide this feature. So I'm yet to work on that. Theoretical possibility exists because the underlying engine does it, but currently not an Arjuna feature.
Awesome. Yeah, so the next question is from Amit. I think we had a similar question from Sunny as well, which said, how do we perform parallel testing in Arjuna or cross-browser?
Cross-browser is, anyways, browser is just a parameter. The thing is, you can do it sequentially or parallel. The way you do it parallel in Arjuna is that you should have a stage, a test stage, in which you configure groups. Now, unlike suite.xml and test.ng, you have to repeat groups in that. It doesn't have a concept of stage or those things. Arjuna has a concept of reusable group definitions, reusable stage definitions, which can be clubbed into sessions. And you can run a session, you can run a stage, you can run a group directly from command line. So there's a lot of it is not equivalent of test.ng suite.xml. It is more powerful than that. But one of the areas where I found testers make mistakes, one of the questions which was asked was around thread safety. That test.ng suite.xml is very powerful when it comes to threads. And that is where testers create problems, okay? Because we are not so thread savvy people. So in Arjuna, what I've done is there's only one place where you can define threads, and that's the test stage. So you can have groups. So if you want a group to be executed on, let's say, multiple browsers, you can have a group definition. You can reuse a group definition in Arjuna. So associate one group with a configuration which, let's say, has a Chrome as the browser name, and the second one with a browser name Firefox, and now run this stage in same stage, different stage. That also you can decide sequentially or parallelly. Doesn't matter. Both are possible.
Awesome. Yeah, the next question is from Ravi. We hear Selenium doesn't support much for web developed Angular framework. How this can be handled with Arjuna?
See, I'm not aware of all the problems in AngularJS. As I come across more and more samples, I can do that. But what I can tell you is The application for which Arjuna is in production usage is an AngularJS app. Yeah. So some of the abstractions, maybe I can build some recipes along the way. For example, I was able to build an abstraction for Angular Grid in that particular implementation. I was able to build an abstraction for the mat tab group. I think it uses Material API along with AngularJS or something like that happens. So it is in use for an AngularJS app, and there are, so it is tricky, but possible. It is already used for that.
Great. Okay, so the next question, Rahul, is from Chandan again. So he says, can you please put some more light on how Arjuna helps handle flaky tests, which are not real failures, as we invest a lot of time in triaging the same?
Okay, so PyTest has this feature called expected failures. Okay, so if you find out that a particular test is flaky, you spend some time on investigating it, and you don't know, maybe it is unstable and it's a known failure, and next time it fails, you don't want it to clutter your result, or you want to know that, okay, it is an expected failure. So in Arjuna also, you can mark a test as an expected fail, and when the test results are shown to you, an expected fail, if it fails, it is reported as X fail or X failed. If it passes, it is reported as X passed. So it is not mixed with the rest of the test results. And in the HTML report, you can filter your results also that way. So that saves some troubleshooting time. There's a second logic which people use, which is basically retry. I am not very fond of that, because maybe we don't know math. So we go for that logic. I'll tell you why. Let's say test failed. You retried it, it passed. Which of the results should you trust? So what testers do is, if second time it passes, they want to trust that result because they want to show to the management high pass rates for some reason which they know or the management knows. The purpose of test automation framework was not to show statistics. It was to tell you, inform you about problems in software. So as long as your focus is on telling about problems to the management, rather than showing them good numbers and good graphs, please stay away from retry logics. It's not a good feature. You can programmatically build it, but it's not a step in the right direction. If you want to build retry logic, I'll tell you how. Take 20 to 25 readings. Do a statistical analysis. Remove the outliers. Then look at the thing. For example, did it pass 18 out of 20 times? Did it pass 48 out of 50 times? Then maybe retry is good. But trying it second time, and if it passes, accepting it because there's a bias towards pass test, that's not retrying logic. Okay. So be very careful to solve flakiness with a single retry or two retries. That's not a good thing to do. And that's what the industry is doing. That's the reason I'm very, very clearly singling it out. Marking it as an expected fail, saving your troubleshooting time. Yes, Arjuna supports.
Great. I think, yeah. So the next question is again from Chandan. It says, in the current world, due to the framework like React and Node, organizations are inclined to use Jest framework as it tests the code end to end. How can I justify using Arjuna instead of Jest or similar tool?
No answer for that. See, when we are, don't fight it too much. Experiment with Arjuna. If you like it, look at the problem and whether Arjuna fits the need. And when I say look at the problem, it doesn't really mean technical problem also. Okay, if an organizational context or a team context is not a context which demands Arjuna, you shouldn't fight it also. And I am also not going to fight it. Just because I've created it, I'm not going to look at every project and try to push Arjuna for them. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell them that this is a Python-based framework. It is not going to serve your need. So that is the whole thing about engineering, that we don't pick the same tool for all problems. If there's a screw, we use screwdriver. If there's a nail, we use a hammer. So if there's a problem which you think Arjuna can serve, we can get in touch, and then I can tell you that how to position it. But then many of the positioning things are beyond technical, supremacy or things like that. That technically it is advanced. Some of the things are other aspects which are organizational aspects for which I can't have a fixed answer.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So the next question is from Amit Rahul. So it says, do we need external add-on for handling window-based pop-ups?
Yes, short answer is yes. So there is no built-in support as of now. Or see, as I mentioned at the beginning, that when we say is X type of interaction supported, it just means that that particular interaction piece is missing. But test definition, assertions, controlling via CLI, these are generic framework features which would be anyways available. So if you can find a Python library which can do it for you, yes, you can club it and use it along with Arjuna. If over a period of time this need is established more and more that this feature is needed, then it gets added to the to-do list of Arjuna, and one day possibly it would be built into Arjuna itself.